Okay, welcome back. We are in phase 2 of this painting, which is now dry, and my plan is to come back into it and start bringing some real definition into the trees, the trunk, the grass, and some of the hillside versus the grass in the background and the distant tree. The sky is, as it is, it's almost where I really need it to be, unless I want to add a few clouds. So I'm going to start by glazing some yellow and some orange type of colors on this tree. Now here's where you need to be thinking about warmth of color, color temperature in phase 2. I might want to warm that blue up. It is a shadow, but it's also a tree that's closer, which means this tree is going to be more full of warm colors than this one will be. This one, I'm going to leave a lot of cool colors on that. So as I do my color mixing, color glazing, those are the things that I'm thinking about. I'm not quite ready for my finest brushes just yet. That'll probably be in phase 3 or phase 4, even if it goes that far. Basically, I'm going to take my yellow, swirl it around, get the yellow rather wet, and I have to keep moving the brush across the surface, and what I'm doing is I'm working off as much pigment from that surface as I can, and I'm going to be dropping it in my palette. Here, let me put this against it so it doesn't want to move on me. There we go. I'm going to do this one-handed. There we go. Now, I like that. I'm also going to use a little red. I'm going to move that over here. Now, in order to use these two, I think I'm going to take just a spot of red and move it, see how much I have on it. I'm going to mix that in with the yellow and make orange. Like that. I'm going to go ahead and put that on top of my blue. Actually, add a little more red to that. There we go. And I'm focusing on the blue areas, but I don't care too much if it runs into the yellow. I think that'll be kind of handy later on. Give me a real sense of depth. Now I'm going to go ahead and carry that brown down into the trunk and even on top of the blue there. Like so. And what that really does, it starts to add a lot of depth to it. It really draws that tree forward and makes it look a lot more nearby than it did earlier. I'm going to go ahead and add some blue back to this area while it's still wet. And it becomes a less pure blue because of that orange that's mixed onto it, which I'm going to take and add right on top of it while it's wet. I'm going to move it around a little bit. I'm pretty much done with the tree top. As done as I can be for now with the tree top. The trunk I could probably do a little work on, but I need a smaller brush because it's a smaller space. I'm going to get some of that red and that orange. Dab it onto the blue. I don't want to stroke the brush across that too much, because what you can end up doing if you're not careful is getting rid of the first layer. Oh, and I'm starting to bleed into the sky or the background there, so I'm going to clean the brush. If it starts to bleed, you can just lift that off with your brush and say go back where you came from. Okay. Now for the tree in the background, I'm going to use a smaller brush, maybe the bamboo, and I'm just going to come back and hit it with blue. And then maybe a little green on top of the blue. I'm gonna go ahead and put this blue on top of the yellow because again, I don't want it to appear too bright. And that looks a little too wet, like the pool is getting rid of my details, so I'm going to absorb some of that off. Just going to take it back off with the brush. There we go. And dry the tip just by squeezing without pulling. I'm just going to hold it with one hand and squeeze and get a lot of that moisture out of there. I'm going to pull some of that moisture back off, just like that, just with a touch. Instead of adding yellow to this, I think my first move, I could get a little yellow from over here or here, come back up, but I think I'm just going to go straight to green, because green is a cool color. Even though it's made with yellow, it's still classified as cool. And it's a color that you can use to push back into space. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the green right on top of my field. And you see it's not going to be a pure green. What I'm getting started with here is a green that's more like turquoise, which is what I want. And I'm painting around the tree trunk this time. I'm not painting through it like I did before. I'm going to go ahead and take that green all the way down into the yellow areas and give it some unity. And again, what I'm doing is a glaze wash. If you think about it in terms of steps, successions, one step in front of another, you see I'm bleeding here a little bit down into this area, so I'm going to lift some of that up. If I want it to get darker, I can always wait and do darker later. If it starts to bleed into an area you don't want, you may as well lift it off the canvas, or off the paper in this case. I'm going to go ahead and put this green up here as well. I'm not going to touch that because it's very wet, so I'm leaving a little gap because I don't want it bleeding. Just got to take care not to do that. I'm going to put green on top of the yellow. I really prefer that the colors on the palette, as pure as they are, don't make it that pure onto your painting. I think the colors on your painting should be mixed on purpose to reflect whatever it is that you want to achieve, which means if I see this green make an appearance here, it should be mixed with another color. It should not be that green by itself. You know, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, I'm moving the camera just a little bit so you can see the bottom corner here, but I think my next step in this stage is to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and do indications very, with soft edges and on wet of blades of grass. And what I'm doing is I'm going to use brush strokes in the foreground that just go upward. And I'm not really concerned about fine details yet. Not yet. And this is where it's going to feel like drawing. But what I'm doing isn't very detailed. But when you're painting wet on top of wet, sometimes you're going to notice sometimes you paint through a brush stroke and it makes it look like the most recent one takes away from the layer that was in front of it, which is helpful. And this is going to be handy when I actually go back and do more detail. And these are kind of tall in this area. Adds to the texture. And this is where it might get a little tedious or boring from some people, but at the same time, when you look at it, you know, this is the price that an artist will pay for the sake of having it look better, more realistic, more natural. Now, I'm not going to do this technique back here because that's way off, way far away. But what I can do is have these marks fade and get shorter. Like up here, they're going to be a very short mark. You know, I'm going to get a little more of that color I made. I kind of like that. Got a bristle messing with me. I don't want to cover the entire thing. I would do, what I'm being mindful of is those little light gaps that I have between. I want that. I want those to remain there because, like I said, this is only my first layer. I plan on doing multiple layers of this to add to. And as I go higher up, my marks, brush strokes are getting shorter. Go down here, a little bit longer, a little bit taller. And some should be going, I guess, one direction, some should be going another. And again, when you're thinking about it in terms of layers, you don't really have to be concerned with perfection. You're not looking for every stroke being perfect. What you're doing is creating a textured surface that you can work with and add to or take away from. Like that. This is really starting to take hold. Eventually what I'm going to do is take some of these orange-like colors and put them down in here too for some, maybe some blades of grass that aren't exactly green. I know none of us have that in our lawns at home, but it's kind of the idea. All right, that's phase 2. We'll come back with phase 3 when this is dry.